Thank you. That concludes the debate on cybercrime. On behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee, it's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of motion 20172 on a motion on legislative consent on the Pension Schemes Bill UK legislation, and I call on Shona Robertson to move the motion.
Moved, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. The question on this motion will be put at decision time. The next item of business is consideration of business motion 20199 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme, and I call on Graham Day to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister, and I call on Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wish to add to the business proposed a ministerial statement on the forthcoming rates revaluation. I've intimated the substance of my argument to Mr Day, Mr McKee and the First Minister. The draft valuations for several sectors, if they were to take effect as from April next year, will result in the mass closure of thousands of Scottish businesses and threaten the viability of high streets. I gather from Stephen Montgomery of the Scottish Hospitality Group that the increases in values in some hotels and pubs are 300%. But it's the self-catering sector I wish to address in my remarks this evening. There are 16,513 such properties, and they face an average increase of 120%, up to 300% in some cases. I'll take Mr Hoy if he wishes to intervene.
Yeah, I thank Mr Ewing for taking the intervention. Is he aware that this morning the Scottish Conservatives met with organisations, including the Scottish Hospitality Group, UK Hospitality Scotland and the Association of Scotland Self-Caterers, to hear first-hand their very real concerns about this re-evaluation process and to launch our campaign for an immediate pause in the increases stemming from it? Does he agree with me that ministers simply cannot proceed, given that they are now aware of the devastating consequences that these tax increases will have on hospitality and tourism operators, on jobs and the business operating environment and Scottish economy more widely? So will he therefore, in a spirit of cross-party solidarity, visit scottishconservatives.com today and sign up to our campaign to halt this SNP business tax hike? Because if this government does not listen, it will be last Christmas for many of our cherished businesses.
Fergus Ewing.
Well, I think there should be a cross-party approach on this, and I gather that there's a good prospect that that is what is going to happen. It's the right thing to do. So I'm happy to sign any motion that sets that out, and there we are. Now, are these businesses doing so well? Well, no. A survey of 444 carried out by the SSC found that 47% said they were doing worse than before. Some of them said bookings are falling over a cliff for the forthcoming year ahead. Now, it's the assessors who determine and fix the valuations. I took up the case in writing with their president, Heather Honeyman, who replied, and I quote, stating, in relation to the methodology of the valuation, reference to rents is key. The primary evidence is rents. But only 3% of the 16,513 have rents. That's because they're self-catering. They're not private rents. They're let on a weekly basis. There is no yardstick at all. And the rent isn't an arm's length arrangement. It's very between collected parties. But the clincher is this, that it's not just the trade bodies across the spectre that are objecting to this. It's the Valuation Office in England who do the same job as the assessors in Scotland. Now, what do they have to say about the method that is being used by Heather Honeyman and the Scottish assessors? They say, when we value a property, we generally look at the market value and rent. However, this way of valuing would not be suitable for self-catering holiday homes. That's the assessors in the UK. Let me repeat. This method would not be appropriate for holiday self-catering homes because of a lack of rental information. They go on. We look at the annual income the property is expected to generate to let at its full potential. We request details of income and expenditure from different types of self-catering operators to see what the fair maintainable trade would be. Now, that's exactly the method that the assessors in Scotland used to use. So they've abandoned the method that actually works in England. Yes, I'll take an intervention.
Rachel Hamilton.
Fergus Ewing for taking the intervention. I understand what he's saying about the difference between the assessors in England and the assessors in Scotland, But as the Scottish ministers will say, assessors are independent, and it's actually the Scottish ministers who have the power to make the change, and that's where we should be looking at.
Indeed so, and therefore that's why the solution is not rates relief, it's not tinkering around with evaluations, there's not enough time to do that, it's postponing the revaluation. It's been done in 22, it's been done before, it should be done again. That's the only way, First Minister, this can happen, as you acknowledged the serious problem last Thursday. If not, the assessors will be akin to assassins. They will destroy businesses because the business rates will exceed the whole annual income of thousands of businesses. How on earth is this allowed to happen? The government must step in, and that's why the revaluation must be postponed by this government, or they will cause commercial Armageddon.
Thank you. I call on Stephen Kerr.
Presiding Officer, I'm seeking parliamentary time for this Parliament to scrutinise the Cabinet Secretary for Constitution, External Affairs and Culture on the findings of Audit Scotland's Section 22 report into Historic Environment Scotland. This begins with Historic Environment Scotland itself. Whatever the hilarity on the government front bench is, surely it is not at the state of Historic Environment Scotland, because that is not a peripheral body. It's the steward of more than 300 historic properties. It's the guardian of national collections and archives. It is central to Scotland's cultural identity and to a tourism economy on which many communities depend. Around 1,600 people work for HES across the country, many of them highly skilled professionals, entrusted with assets that once damaged or lost are gone for good. When governance fails in an organisation like that, the consequences are real. They are felt by staff, by communities and by the public, who expect these national assets to be protected properly. And that's why a Section 22 report matters. Audit Scotland does not issue Section 22 reports lightly. They are reserved for situations where the Auditor-General feels Parliament itself must be alerted to serious and systemic concerns. In this case, the report describes unacceptable weaknesses in governance, failures of control and risks to value for money. The Auditor-General is clear that strong controls are now critical to prevent the risk of fraud and to restore confidence. These are not minor or technical issues. The report points to long-running problems in procurement, in data handling, in financial discipline, in leadership arrangements. It highlights the absence, until very recently, of a substantive accountable officer. It describes an organisation where basic disciplines are not applied consistently or enforced robustly. But what gives this report its real weight is what it says and what it confirms about people. Staff and whistleblowers warn the Historic Environment Scotland is at risk of collapse. They speak of a toxic culture, of deep frustration and of concerns that, raised repeatedly, have not been acted upon. The Auditor-General himself acknowledges that issues are persistent for years and have been covered up rather than resolved. This is not an abstract debate about structures. It is about how people are treated, whether warnings are listened to, or whether those who speak up are protected. Whistleblowers take personal risks when they raise concerns, and Parliament has a duty to ensure that those warnings lead to scrutiny and reform, not silence. When a Section 22 report echoes what whistleblowers have been saying for years, ministers must be prepared to explain why earlier intervention did not happen. I'm happy to give way.
Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I rise as the convener of the Public Audit Committee. Is the member aware that the Public Audit Committee will be taking evidence on this Section 22 report? And is he aware that the Constitutional External Affairs Committee is also taking evidence on this Section 22 report?
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I didn't realise there were limitations to the scrutiny of Parliament. I didn't realise that it was somehow out of order for a Cabinet Secretary to be brought to this chamber to account for his failings in the discharge of his responsibilities, according to no less an authority than the Auditor-General for Scotland. Because Historic Environment Scotland is a non-departmental public body, and the Cabinet Secretary is the responsible minister. He appoints the board. He oversees the sponsorship relationship. He's accountable to this Parliament for how that system of governance operates. And I think Richard Leonard knows that. In that context, the Auditor-General identifies a failure by the Scottish Government to appoint an accountable officer. That is a clear statutory duty. Parliament must be able to examine how it was allowed to go unmet and what damage that failure has caused in this chamber and through the committee structure of the Parliament. That is a responsibility that the Cabinet Secretary has that cannot be delegated away. It can't be blurred by process, and it cannot be shifted onto civil servants.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. You must conclude.
It is his responsibility, and he is answerable to this Parliament. So I would like to suggest strongly to the Minister for Parliamentary Business that parliamentary time be made available for the Cabinet Secretary to come to this chamber and address the findings of the Auditor-General's report, which is of critical importance to our country.
Thank you. I call on Graham Day to respond, Minister, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government very much recognises the importance of the self-catering accommodation and more broadly the hospitality sector to Scotland's economy. Of course, the valuation of all non-domestic property is a matter for the Scottish assessors, who are independent of central and local government. However, the Minister for Public Finance is absolutely alive to the issues that Mr Ewing raises. Indeed, Ivan McKee will be meeting with stakeholders to discuss the matter. In fact, he met with the Association of Scotland's Self-Caterers earlier today. I know the member has highlighted these issues to ministers, as he has repeated, and the Minister for Public Finance will respond directly and will be happy to meet with Mr Ewing and others following recess. And of course, non-domestic rates and relief will be announced at the Scottish Budget on the 13th of January. On a more general point, Presiding Officer, members are all too aware of the pressure on the parliamentary business schedule, although that may not always be apparent, judging by the volume of additional asks for statements and debates which land on my desk weekly. There is, Presiding Officer, a significant volume of bills, both Scottish Government and members' bills, which are still being considered. One moment. Chamber time, of course, needs to be prioritised for these proceedings. Standing orders also require that a certain amount of chamber time is allocated to committees and opposition parties. Taking all of this together, following recess, there will be little, if any, time for additional activity led by the Scottish Government. I give way to Rachel Hamilton.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you to Graham Day for giving way. I recognise that the Parliament is under huge pressure with legislative requirements. However, in terms of the rateable value, seeing the increase of RVs up to 300% is even more of a pressure on businesses, and we might not see these businesses into the spring. And I think we need to put them before us.
Minister.
I've already identified the importance that Ivan McKee places on this, but I would just point out to Rachel Hamilton, we constantly hear from members, particularly on her bench, about late sittings, and then they come back to Parliament and demand more to be added to the programme. And Mr Stewart's comments were heard by the Chamber, obviously. The business motion before us, I think, includes committee and opposition debates in the first week of January. And across the first 2 weeks, there are 4 Stage 1 debates and a Stage 3. And I think that indicates the point, or supports the point I've made. Given the genuine engagement that the Minister for Public Finance is undertaking on this matter and the pressures facing the business schedule, a statement on this topic will not be scheduled at this time. But as I've said, Ivan McKee will engage directly with Fergus Ewing and with others post-recess and advance of the budget. Now, turning to Mr Kerr, I'm not clear whether his latest demand, whilst challenging the business programme, is for a statement or a debate. But I would point to the fact that he serves on the Culture Committee, which has been looking very closely at this matter and will, as I understand it, provide further opportunities for him to progress this. And of course, as Richard Leonard pointed out, the Public Audit Committee is also considering the matter he highlights. Now, I, seemingly more so than Mr Kerr, have great respect for the committee process of this Parliament. I think it's the engine room of this Parliament. And we have not one, but two parliamentary processes underway. And given the pressure on business, I would not be inclined to schedule the item that Mr Kerr is seeking. Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And the question is that motion 20199 be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. I call Douglas Ross for a point of order.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. This afternoon, the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs has written to me confirming that she is requesting a change to the official report of this Parliament from the meeting of the 15th of September. This came under questioning today at the Education, Children and Young People's Committee. It has come after weeks and months of MSPs in this chamber asking for the record to be corrected. That was refused by Angela Constance, and it was refused by John Swinney. Now, Angela Constance has agreed to do so. However, the advice on correcting information during proceedings and after proceedings is different. So if a mistake is not notified during the proceedings, there are different aspects that a member has to go through. And it states in our advice that a member may ask to make a statement during the next available plenary session to explain the change in the official report. So first of all, can I ask you, Presiding Officer, if you have received any requests from the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs to make a statement? And how will Parliament have the opportunity to review the change the Cabinet Secretary wishes to make to the official report, given that we only have one sitting day until the festive recess? Therefore, if it is not made in tonight's official report, we will not get tomorrow's official report until Parliament has risen. So can I ask if a statement request has been made? And given that it is supposed to happen in the next plenary session after the mistake was identified, we know that Professor Alexis Jay wrote to Angela Constance on the 26th of September, identifying the correction and clarification she wished to have made. It is now being made on the 17th of December. In our standing orders, what remit is there for you, Presiding Officer, to deal with a member that takes so long to correct the official record?
Thank you, Mr Ross. There were several points there that I will seek to address. I begin by saying that anything said in proceedings of the Parliament or in committee is recorded in the official report, so any statement of the Parliament can be used to correct the record. As members are aware, and as Mr Ross has alluded to, a mechanism exists where a member can seek to correct any inaccuracy on their part within 20 days of the publication of the relevant proceedings, and that time limit exists because official reports are then finalised and they cannot be changed again. And other ways of ensuring that a correction is made widely known include writing to myself, copying the correspondence to all business managers and any members who are not represented in the Bureau, and placing a copy of that correction in SPICE. And of course, a member of the Scottish Government can seek to make a statement to the Parliament, and I would confirm at this moment that that request has not been made. And I call Angela Constance for a point of order.
Point of order, Presiding Officer, just for information for the benefit of Chamber that have received confirmation from the official record confirming the receipt of my request, saying that they are not able to make my proposed change under the official report's remit, but they are, however, forwarding my request for a correction to the business team for consideration under members' corrections procedures, and the business team will inform me of the decision about the correction request.
Thank you. I think we will continue with our business. And the next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 20200 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on timetabling of a bill at stage 1. Any member who wishes to speak to the motion should press their request to speak button now. I call on the Minister to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
And I call on Pauline McNeill. Thank you, Ms McNeill. It appears that was unintentional. No member has asked to speak to the motion. Therefore, the question is that motion 20200 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is consideration of 3 Parliamentary Bureau motions, and I ask Graham Day, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, to move motions 20201 and 20202 on approval of SSIs and 20203 on committee membership.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on these motions will be put at decision time. And there are 2 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first is that motion 20172 in the name of Shona Robertson on a motion on legislative consent for the Pension Schemes Bill UK legislation be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. And I propose to ask a single question on 3 Parliamentary Bureau motions. Does any member object? No member objects. The question is that motions 20201 and 20202 on approval of SSIs and 20203 on committee membership in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motions are therefore agreed. And that concludes decision time. And we will now move on to members' business, which this evening is in the name of Rachel Hamilton.